Hello, dreamers and drama queens. My name is Teemo, and there's a new champion teaser out for the newest champion to come to League of Legends, who unfortunately had her splash art leaked a little while back, Lilia the Bashful Bloom. And since this is technically an animated teaser, well, if you follow this channel for any amount of time, you know what that means. It means it's time to look extensively through every single frame of this goddamn thing while I talk entirely too much about the various animation techniques that, at least the ones that I can spot, that have been used to create this thing, because that's what I get excited about, so, you know, deal with it. We'll have full thoughts about the champion and her character design and all the rest of it later on down the line, but for the moment, Lilia, teaser, animation. So, the first things first is that the majority of this teaser is taken up by, well, not a lot of animation. As we get into these sequences here, the dream sequences, mostly what you have here is a series of two-dimensional images, as you can see, that are being scrolled left and right and zoomed in and out on with a parallax effect. Let me see if I can find a proper place to start. Where you can see, for example, these are all Spirit Blossom skins for various champions that are coming to the game. In this case, this is Teemo's Spirit Blossom skin, which is being presented in the context of this teaser as essentially his dreams of himself, sorta, kinda, like this is how Teemo sees himself in certain dreams. But as you can see, the animation on display here is mostly, if you take a look at the Teemo statue over here, it's just like the statue in front is scrolling past a little bit faster than the lantern in the back, and that gives you this three-dimensional effect, as though you're entering into a space that's actually deep, even though these are 2D illustrations that are being projected into probably a 3D scene with a camera that's manipulating the location of the thing. So we're going to focus more on the 3D animation that's in this thing, because the 2D animation is mostly just static images with a bunch of effects applied to them. Which is also animation, by the way. I'm not saying it's not animation, it's not animation I'm especially interested in here. So, Lilia is themed around Spirit Blossoms, which is special flowers that live in Ionia, which do something that has to do with dreams, and also sometimes they bring the dead back to life, or maybe not back to life. We don't know. It's going to have something to do with Yone once he's revealed as the next champion, which is still my prediction that Yone is going to be the next champion, or Yone, or whatever you want to call him. But it's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about this bit. Anyway, the establishing shot of this teaser, like, Lilia is, in her lore, which is already up on the website, Lilia is, in fact, a spirit blossom herself, essentially. Like, she's the blossom of a dream that grew on a tree and then fell to earth and blossomed into the fawn, cute lady thing that she eventually became, and this is kind of that. Like, it's that thing again. It's basically her origin story right there, being a spirit blossom herself. Mental connection, blah, 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 tendrils of energy and power that flow into the bloom on her head, which is what this thing is. This is the first bit of actual 3D animation we get, where you can see the bloom slowly swirling open in response to the power of the Spirit Blossom, which is how she works, like in terms of how she's conceptualized as a character. Her whole thing is that she gathers dream energy from people. And that dream energy interacts with the spirit blossom that she herself is and allows her to bloom into this gorgeous little flower thing. And it's a relatively simple bit of animation to open the flower here. Let me see if I can. It's a little unwieldy to try and go back and forth in this thing. It's a simple animation, but it works really well because even though the thing remains stationary, like it doesn't actually spin, there's a little bit, you can see how the petals stretch a little bit and twist, so that when they unfurl into a restful state, and the blossom inside unfurls itself, and you get this sensation that it almost spun itself open like that, which is a lovely little bit of good animation that gives you that flowery feel to it, rather than something mechanical open up. It feels like something that's biological, that's like soft and pliable and fleshy that opens up, which I like. And then there's Lilia herself, and like I said, I'll have my thoughts about her character design later. Who has this very Disney princess. Like, this is very sort of Frozen, Tangled, like sort of in that general aesthetic tradition, kind of similar to what we saw with Nico. Very similar to what we saw with Nico, in fact. But anyway, let's talk about it later. And the primary animation that she does here is basically just her eyes. Like, there's no movement of her mouth. I don't even think there's really any movement of her eyebrows as she opens her eyes. Nope. And we've got these swirling effects around her. So you have this very limited bit of animation with which to convey what kind of character do we have here. Well, she opens her eyes and they're these big, like, just huge eyeballs. And look at her irises right there as she looks at a thing. We don't really know exactly what that thing is, but she looks at something and the irises expand massively, which is unusual because, like, usually when you look at something that's bright or interesting, your irises would contract to let less light through, but she's opening her eyes. Like, not only she opens her eyes once here before the blink. Look. She opens her eyes once, and then she opens her eyes again. As you can see, like, her iris is expanding clearly to see something, to perceive something. So you have this very limited little bit of gesture where basically all we have from her is, like, opening the eyes, and then the little twitch of the eyeballs back and forth where you can kind of see that she's taking something in or thinking or processing some kind of an emotion. Then we have the blink, where there's a lovely little bit of follow-through. You see her eyelashes is essentially of flowers, or flower petals, flower blooms. And as her eyes flutter shut, you can see how they kind of trail behind the motion of her eyelids, which I thought was a very nice little detail that makes them feel different from hairs, that makes them feel actually like they're flower petals functioning as her eyebrows. And this is also the other little tiny gesture we get where when she's looking up and her irises are about to expand, that's when her mouth falls open just a little bit. You get this expression of wonder that she's going with as we dive into her mind and start to see what she sees, and what she mostly sees is a bunch of skins that Riot would like to sell you. So, as advertisement, it's working perfectly fine the way it's supposed to. But notice the effects that's being used here. We have this purple swirl that follows us through the scene with Teemo, and that swirl then does this to the moon. Whoop! We get the same swirly sensation, creating a transition for us into the next scene, where you can see again, right around the edges, that little purple swirl following us about. As we see a frog getting astral projected somewhere, and a few masks showing up. Now this, to me, looks a heck of a lot like Kindred, but Kindred has not had a Spirit Blossom skin announced for them, which means that this might be some kind of lore reference to the Taker and the Collector, or the Gatekeeper, or whatever, from this, the story about the Spirit Blossoms, which had a name which I've forgotten, but there was a lore story recently which I theorized was primarily a teaser for Yone, but which also includes mention of of a mask-based festival in Ionia, so there might be a little bit of a lore teaser here somehow. And again, we get the purple swirl announcing the transition to a third skin that Riot would like to sell you. This one being for Riven, although there hasn't been an official Spirit Blossom Riven skin announced yet. They've announced a bunch of them, and Riven isn't one of them, so I guess this is a teaser that she'll get one eventually, and she's got a stand, so I guess she's a JoJo character now. I don't know if that's supposed to be, maybe that's a Zed skin or something, what exactly this is supposed to be, but it doesn't really matter. What matters is this bit. And again, I want to stress, we have these very limited gestures, but you look at this, and you kind of feel like at least for me, I feel like, okay, I have a sense of what kind of character this is. This is someone who's inquisitive. This is someone who is gaping at something in wonder, who's curious. But who's also perhaps vulnerable, which again, that's the very basic thing about character design, won't go too deep into it, but is if you give someone a round face with large eyes, those are the proportions of a human baby, and therefore the human brain is programmed to respond to it in kind of the same way, which is, oh my god, precious thing, must protect, which is why baby things are cute. And that's being used very well here by, just focusing on her eyes, specifically. and the little movements that they're making. So here we have her central conflict, which is that this tree right here is her mom, because the tree had the blossom that fell to the ground and became Lilia. And I think it might be this tree, or maybe it's another tree, who knows, but whatever the case, the tree is dying because it's not getting dream energy from people. The dreams that are supposed to reach it from human beings aren't reaching them, so it's dying, and that's being indicated with this fading purple light that's going out as Lilia seems to be casting some kind of spell to try and heal it or something along those lines. And here we get a little bit of an uncanny thing. See, because you look at the tree itself, look at the way of the style of the environment that's rendered here. Very detailed, like lots of fine granular details, lots of leaves, lots of details on the tree bark and stuff like that. It looks like not a realistic environment as such, but a highly rendered environment. Then we look at Lilia in this particular scene, and I don't know if maybe they just used the character model from in-game to do this, but she looks a little like plastic, doesn't she? Like, she looks like she's made of hard plastic, like she's an action figure or something. And that, I feel like it clashes a lot with the rendering of the environment. If the environment wasn't so realistically rendered, relatively speaking, or so detailed in its rendering, then it wouldn't be such a thing. But because the model that they've gone with here looks really plastic to me, It looks very, very smooth, especially her skin. That's partly also due to the lighting, but like this smoothness and especially this sort of the shape of her hair. And I think again her hair is supposed to approximate flower petals, but it kind of doesn't work because I identify it visually as hair, and then because it's collected in these like slabs of not hair, flower petal, whatever, that fall over her face. It just looks like it's molded out of plastic and it just sits on her head, and it's not helped by the weird fuzziness of her fur, because she does have fur. She's a furry character. Not a furry character, but a character who has fur and is therefore furry. Which looks like felt, basically. Like, it looks kind of like a toy, again, like the kind of fur you would get on some kind of children's toy, which feels out of step with the environment, which is a little bit of a, like, it's not a big deal as such, but it especially with the lighting, with the way the highlights are cast on the flower on her head and such, it's just a little thing. Anyway, back to the character animation, which is the thing that I actually wanted to talk about. So, when you see that, this is something I talk about a lot. Just look at this gesture right here. You get that, just that. What's your sense of her personality? What's your sense of the kind of character that she is, the kind of person that she is, her approach to the world, how she relates to things around her? She's serious-minded, clearly. Like, there's worry in that expression. She's got this gesture out doing this magic spell thing that then fizzles out, which surprises her. And then there's this, oh, and you can see with the shoulders and the position of the shoulders and the chest, and the ears hanging down, and then also the position of the hair. This is one way in which the character design is used to benefit the personality, like kind of hanging down over her head, not obscuring her, but giving a little bit of that sense of like her head being permanently a little bit downcast, like she's shrinking into herself a little bit. And you get these little gestures of uncertainty, like this little oh, and then what am I supposed to do? And then this is the gesture that I really like, that really informs her. Look how she treats the staff. She treats the staff not like a weapon, not as like a powerful, mystical, magical weapon full of energy that shall give me the power to destroy my enemies. It's a security blanket. It's a guardian totem. It's something to hide behind. That's basically what she does when she clutches it up to her chest like that. It's like she's basically hiding behind it a little bit, which gives you that sense of her shyness. And I really like that tiny little gesture. And then once she's like, she makes the decision of like, I can do this in her, I think it's a Scottish accent. That's when she like comes out from behind the hiding spot. Because like first it's like, oh dear, I'm uncertain, must hide. but I can do this. And then she comes out from behind the hiding spot and moves in. And here comes a lovely little bit of animation, something that kudos to the animator for figuring it out, but do you see that contrasting rhythm she has on her little saunter? Which is like one of the basics of like how an animal moves. And I don't know if deer necessarily move that way, but you see how she treads down with her right leg there, and then the rump sways to the right, and then sways to the left, sways to the right, sways to the left. And you get this contrasting feeling of like, because of course she's taking different steps with different legs on different ends of her body, which can be a difficult rhythm to manage, because like the human walking rhythm, we know that. We know that physically, we walk around every day, but the animal walking rhythm, like the walking rhythm that an animal would have, especially if that animal has a bunch of extra weight on the front that a normal deer wouldn't have, that's a different matter entirely, and communicating that through movement is really difficult. And she has some fantastic, I've seen some of her in-game animations, and we're going to have a lot of fun talking about those because they're excellent. But I really like that swaying counter rhythm. You have that where you can see each part of her kind of the motion moving into the other part, like the front of the body is leading, and then the back of her body is trailing along and kind of mirroring whatever motion the front of the body made last. And it looks really nice. And that's a really difficult thing. Like I've seen animators get this wrong because it's really, really hard to do. But there's something good going on here, because one of the clever things that the animator does is keeps her upper body, like her human upper body, mostly steady. Like you don't see a lot of swaying on that one, so the swaying, like this swaying sensation you get from her movement is all being handled by the back of her, and you can see that in the way, especially if you take a look at the tip of the tail, back and forth, trailing behind the movement of her rump, and giving that. But her upper body, her torso, doesn't sway from side to side. You have this up and down motion. You can even see, I think, a little bit of squashing and stretching as she moves around. You can see here how, as she's about to step down, her torso kind of seems to stretch into, and then once she lands on her foot, you can see how it kind of settles in and then gets pushed up, and settles in and gets pushed up. Which is a bunch of subtle little details that help give her a really appealing walk cycle. And again, I don't know about the realism necessarily. Like, I don't know if you watch a real deer walk around that it would necessarily look quite like this, but it's very appealing. Like, even from behind, even when you can't see the face of the character, this is still cute. Like, this is still kind of adorable to watch her, like, sauntering along that way. And I think that's really nice. Even if, again, like her, because she's blurred here, because there's some Gaussian blur going on, I think, or some lens blur, it's not as egregious, but you can, I still kind of feel like she stands out a lot from the background environment. And I can't help but think if maybe they were going for a kind of tilt-shifted, toy-like world aesthetic, and it just kind of got disrupted by the 2D illustrations that they were using, because those had complete clarity, and disrupted a little bit by all the close-ups that they were doing of character animation, because again, that, I don't think for a tilt-shifted kind of Toyland perspective kind of, I don't think that really works so much. I don't know if that was what they were trying, but speaking of Disney and Frozen and Tangled, I mean, yeah. But we'll get to that once we actually talk about her character design. Anyway, I think that's about all I really had to say about this teaser. There's some really good stuff going on in here. It's very well produced. I love the use of the swirling purple during the dream sequences to kind of transition us through the scenes. And you can see how the swirl of the purple sets up the swirl of the moon into this scene transition as we get to this bit, which kind of feels like the logic of dreams, like where things kind of just glide into and out of each other, and one dream turns into another one, and there isn't really a clear delineating point. Like, that's very well managed, I think, even if it is just like a commercial for skins that they want to sell us in the future. Oh, Lord. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this deeply unstructured ramble about Lilia and her champion teaser, then you can hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons down below. And if you do subscribe, then also you get to see when I do a video about her actual character design and maybe compare her to another recent League of Legends champion who has some very similar themes and literally the same color scheme. But that's all for later. For now, thank you very much for watching. If you want to, I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. You can use them to support me. That's very nice. I'd be appreciative of that. And if not, that's completely okay. Please don't worry about it. I do try to encourage people to, generally speaking, at the end of all my videos, support content that they love with direct contributions of whatever they can, whenever they can. Because even that $1 pocket change donation, that is a little bit of money that was lying at the back of your couch kind of thing, can, for an online content creator, be the same as literally thousands of views on a video. And especially for niche content creators, that can make a huge amount of difference. So if there's online content that you like, consider supporting it directly with whatever you can, whenever you can, because it makes much more of a difference than you think. I also have some links down in my description, down at the top, to various causes, bail funds, and charities that are helping people who are currently doing, you know, kind of a lot of work trying to push back against police brutality in the United States. And if you feel like that's a better use of your money than sending it to online internet mans who talk about animation for too long, you know, I don't disagree with you at all. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to wash your hands and have solidarity with those who are trying to make the world a better place.